In this Magic Legends video, we're going to be covering all the blue spells in Magic Legends, or blue cards, sorceries, enchantments, and creatures. And let's start with sorceries first, since there are a few to get through. The first spell here is Glint, and for 2 mana, for 10 seconds, the creature with the lowest percentage of health gains +0/+3 in hexproof, meaning it can't be targeted directly by foes, so it can still be clipped by AoEs, but it can't be attacked directly. And if the target has less than 50% of its maximum health, it'll draw a spell. Unlike Magic the Gathering, you won't actually have more than 4 cards in your hand, and there's 6 seconds in between card draws in this game, so what this does is allow you to draw the next spell instantly after casting this. Magnetic Pulse is a ground-targeted AoE that deals damage and pulls enemies to that location as well as roots them for 2 seconds, so if you want some crowd control with a little bit of damage, this is a great spell. There are a lot of spells in the blue repertoire that deal extra damage if a target is under a crowd control effect, so this is a good way to set up those spells. Mass Manipulation allows you to take control of the enemy creatures in the area around you for 10 seconds, and the way this works is that if you keep holding down the spell, you use more and more mana, and the area around you gets larger and larger. So you're going to take control of more creatures by spending more mana because you're going to grab more area around you. Mistform for 4 seconds gives you greater swiftness, increasing your movement speed, gives you immunity to crowd control, so if you're rooted to something, you're going to pop out of it, and you can pass through enemies. So this is a great spell to pop if you need to get out of a sticky situation, and it also applies lesser snare to foes you pass through, so it's going to sort of slow them down a bit as well. Telestrike is one of my favorite blue spells. Not only does it disorient the foes near you for 8 seconds when you teleport, which makes it so that they can't move or do any actions, it also deals AoE wherever you teleport to, and it also deals additional damage to foes that are affected by crowd control effects. So if you teleport directly into the same place, you disorient those foes, then you land on top of them for the extra critical damage, so you can deal a ton of damage if you port directly where you were standing to begin with. Chronosphere is a ground-targeted AoE ability that puts down greater slow and greater snare in an area for 6 seconds, owing anything inside of it, while also granting creatures inside of it greater haste and greater swiftness. This means that creatures inside it are going to attack slower and move slower, but your creatures are going to attack faster and move faster. Psionic Shatter deals incredible damage to foes in a line in front of you, and it also deals additional damage to foes affected by a crowd control effect, and allows you to draw a spell if this is the case. As I mentioned before, this just means the next spell that you'll draw will be instant instead of taking 6 seconds. The Sleep spell is a ground-targeted AoE that basically puts creatures to sleep. They are disoriented, and that effect makes it so that they can't move or take actions unless they get hit. So if you want to take a group of creatures out of a battle where you're fighting a big battle, for instance, or maybe you just want to put one creature to sleep while you're fighting a strong creature while you're fighting a bunch of other creatures, this is a good way to use that spell. Time Unravel is basically an oh shit button. For 3 seconds you have greater swiftness. This increases your movement speed tremendously, and after 3 seconds you return to the amount of life and mana you had upon casting the spell. So if you're completely surrounded, pop this spell, get the heck out of there, and then all of a sudden your life goes all the way back up to what it was before you popped this spell. So if you're just getting wailed on or about to be wailed on, this is a good time to pop this ability. Tolarian Winds basically allows you to discard your hand and then draw that many spells. So if you don't like your hand, this is a great way to basically cycle through your deck and get some more spells that you like, and it also grants lesser swiftness. Being able to get the cards you want is a big part of playing blue in Magic the Gathering, and it's also a big part in Magic Legends. Concentrate allows you to draw 3 spells. This means the next 3 spells that you draw will be instantaneous. So you'll cast this, then you'll draw one instantly, and you should have 2 more that are going to pop instantly anytime you use a spell, but you also have a 40% chance to draw a 4th spell. So this is a great way to queue up spells so that you can burn through your spells quickly and not have to wait for that 6 seconds in between each spell. Frost Armor is absolutely outstanding. It not only gives you a damage shield for 5 seconds, but when you activate it, it stuns foes that attack you for 4 seconds. So any foe that attacks, so if you're surrounded and you pop this, it's going to stun everything around you. And then when the spell ends, it deals damage and stuns everything around you again. Just an amazing spell overall. Icicle is a damaging spell that hits foes in a line and stuns them for 4 seconds. It's just a great spell for hitting a lot of enemies and, taking them out of the fight for a little bit. Dominate is a sorcery that allows you to take control of a target creature for 15 seconds. It seems like it can be any creature. I haven't tested it on every creature type in the game, whether it's elite or champion, but it seems to be by the description that it works on any creature, so that's huge. You could take control potentially of an elite creature and it could just wreak havoc on all the other creatures around you. Icy River is a really cool spell because not only is it a good mobility spell by letting you charge forward, it deals damage over time in a line. So not only is it going to allow you to get out of a sticky situation, you're going to damage everything that's left behind, and also snare them with lesser snare, reducing their movement speed. Tidal Wave is another fantastic damaging spell. It hits things in a line in front of you, for a pretty big line, I should say, and it also applies lesser snare, so it slows them down. Tornado is sort of an interesting spell because it has a random movement pattern, like sort of in the forward direction after you cast it, that deals damages to foes inside it over 5 seconds, but also pulls enemies into it. Since you can't really control it, you really need to use it in a pack of enemies to get the most from it. Phantasmagoria is a great AoE spell that deals damage over time and also applies greater weakness to creatures that are stuck inside it, or enemy creatures rather, so that they deal less damage to you. So this is a great one to like pop around you while you're, surrounded by a lot of creatures, or just throw into a big group of creatures. Interrogate is actually a blue-black spell. It's a multicolored spell. To my knowledge, there are only 2 multicolored spells in the game during the beta currently. I'm sure more will be added over time. But what this spell does is for 8 seconds, the creature you control at the highest power gets +2/+0, so it's going to get bigger and do more damage, and you also draw a spell. But there's more. If you control a creature with 4 more power than its toughness, you're going to draw 2 spells instead. Black has a lot of creatures that are like this, so this works really well with a blue-black deck, which is the only way you can play the spell. Moving along to the blue creatures, the first one is Deeproot Stalker. This is a 3/1 creature for 2 blue mana, and it has hexproof, meaning it cannot be targeted directly by other creatures, as I explained before. This makes it like a lot harder to kill, because even though it's very squishy, it has to get caught by like an AoE effect or something like that, a conal effect, in order to die. It's not going to be attacked directly by creatures. Muse Drake is a 1/3 for 2 blue mana, and essentially its benefit is that when you summon it, you draw a spell instantly, so you're going to replace this card in your hand instantaneously when you cast it with a new spell. Homarid Warrior is a 3/3 creature for 3 mana, and it has an activated ability, meaning if you draw this card while you already have it on the battlefield, instead of when you cast it just replacing the one that's already out there, what's going to happen is you're going to use its activated ability instead, and it's going to gain +X/+0, where X is the toughness of the creature for 8 seconds. So let's just say it's a typical 3/3. In this case, it would become 6/3 for 8 seconds, but if you'd buffed it with anything else, then it would become even higher. Stitch Drake works a little bit similarly to Muse Drake, but instead of being a 1/3, it's a 3/1, and on death, you draw a spell. So you're going to throw it out there, it's going to fight. When it dies, you'll draw a spell when that happens instead of being on summon. Alchemic Thaumaturge is a 2/2 creature for 3 mana, and essentially it has a passive bonus while it's out, makes it so all of your sorceries cost 25% less mana. This is great if you can keep up your card generation, then you can just keep cranking out the sorceries. Maybe if you make like a blue-red deck or a blue deck with a lot of sorceries, this would be a good creature for you. Spawning Bed is a bit of an interesting creature card. It spawns 5/0/2 eggs, and after you cast 2 sorceries, they basically hatch and become 5/1 Homarids. Any of them that survive that long. It doesn't take too long to cast 2 sorceries, but it does require a little bit of planning. For instance, you might want to wait till you have 2 sorceries in your hand to throw this out so they don't die while you're using those, waiting to draw those sorceries. Illusory Allies gives you 3/1/2 creatures for 3 blue mana, and this is actually really good. This is a good way to get out a bunch of cheap creatures really quickly, so if you're concentrating on making a deck that's like a lot of low creatures that you buff, maybe if you're playing like a blue-white deck, for instance, or maybe a blue-green deck, this is fantastic. Academy Wizard is a 3/2 creature for 4 mana, and its benefit is that whenever you draw 1 or more spells, it summons a 1/1 illusion creature for 30 seconds, up to a maximum of 3. Since you're going to be drawing spells quite regularly with a blue deck usually, this means it will almost always have the maximum out if you can keep it alive. Evolozoa is a bit of an interesting card because essentially what happens is you cast a 1/1 for 4 mana, which isn't great, but it has Regenerate, so when it dies, it becomes a 2/3 creature that has Regenerate, and then when it dies again, it becomes a 4/5 that doesn't have Regenerate. So basically it has a couple of lives, and it gets stronger and stronger, and it's just a really good creature that doesn't go away very easily because of this. Homarid Shaman is a 2/5 creature for 4 mana, which is pretty decent. It has a lot of health, so it doesn't die easy. But what's really good about this creature is that it has an activated ability, so again, if you draw this card while one's already on the battlefield instead of replacing it, you can use the activated ability for 3 mana to just draw a spell. That basically means that this card is never wasted in your hand, because even if you draw a duplicate, you can just draw a spell and replace it really quick, which is fantastic. Water Elemental is a 4/4 creature for 5 mana, and when you summon it, it pulls foes to the location and knocks them down. So you want to try and time the summoning of this creature into like a group of enemies so that it groups them all up and maybe you drop an AoE on them or something after that. Lullmage Captivator is a 1/3 for 5 mana, which is expensive for such a low health and power creature. However, when you summon it, it takes control of a nearby creature until this creature leaves the battlefield or combat ends. So you could take control of a very powerful creature as long as you can keep it alive, and it'll stay under your control until, this creature dies, or maybe you kill all the creatures and combat ends, and then it'll untake control of it. So it's just really, really strong if you can keep it alive. Lorekeeper Sphinx is a 3/6 creature for 6 mana and has a ton of health, and it also has the benefit of gaining +X/+0, where X is the number of spells in your hand. This can't be more than 4, so it could be a 7/6 creature. If you're not going around casting a ton of spells and you're only using them as you need them, maybe you have like a lot of creatures in your deck, this would make this a very powerful creature for the cost. And it also has a special ability of damaging and knocking back foes in a cone, which is fantastic as well. Avatar of Frost is a fantastic creature. It's a 5/7 for 10 mana, which is quite expensive, but it stuns enemies when you summon it into battle, so you want to make sure you summon it into a group, and it has a special ability where it deals damage and stuns nearby foes for 2 seconds. This thing is tanky as hell, it hits like a truck, it stuns and AoEs periodically. It's a very, very good creature. It might actually be the best creature in Magic Legends currently. I'm going to include the artifact creatures here as well because they can be used in a blue deck effectively. And the first one is Experimental Scorpion, and it costs 1 less for each artifact creature you control. There aren't a ton of artifact creatures currently in the beta, so this isn't going to be so useful. But what's really great is when it dies, it summons 3 1/1 spiraling artifact tokens for 30 seconds. So it's going to be a 3/3 creature, then when it dies, it's basically going to split into 3, and you have a few creatures running around that you can buff or whatever for 30 seconds. Experimental Sentinel is an artifact creature. It's a 5/5 for 6 mana, which is pretty good. It's pretty hard to kill, it hits all right. But what it has is an ability that allows it to charge forward and elide and damage foes, so you can deal a lot of damage if you can get it in the middle of enemies. And it also heals you whenever another artifact creature comes into the battlefield. Again, this isn't like a ton of creatures currently in Magic Legends, but Experimental Scorpion, for instance, when it dies, brings 3 in, then it can heal you for a lot of health. And the last creature I'm going to cover here is Nightveil Stalker. This is actually the second blue-black card. It is a multicolored card, so you have to play it in a blue-black deck. But it's a 4/1 creature for 3 mana. It's kind of squishy, but it's got hexproof, so it can't be targeted by other creatures. And when you summon it, it deals damage to 1 foe and stuns it for a little bit of time. And it also has a special ability that every 3rd spell you draw, it's going to teleport to a foe, deal damage, and stun it. It also loses hexproof when it uses this ability. I found that this often gets this creature killed, so you have to be very careful when you draw that 3rd spell and keep an eye on that creature. Last up, we have blue enchantments, and enchantments in this game work a bit differently than Magic the Gathering. They all last 30 seconds except for 1 single enchantment, which lasts 42 seconds. The rest are all 30. They sort of work like a long-duration sorcery. They are obviously not considered sorceries, so things that affect sorceries do not affect them, but for all intents and purposes, they are effectively long sorceries. Thought Cadence is the first one, and it makes it for 30 seconds. Whenever you cast a spell of a different type than the last spell, you draw a spell. So when you cast this, you've cast an enchantment. Then if you cast a sorcery, you'll draw a spell. Then if you cast a creature, you'll draw a spell. Then if you cast another enchantment or another sorcery, you'll draw a spell, and so on and so on. This makes a deck that's, very well balanced between enchantments, sorceries, and creatures very good, because you can take full advantage of this enchantment. Psychic Berry is a fantastic enchantment if you have a lot of creatures out. Again, maybe a deck where you have a lot of squishy creatures or medium-sized creatures. For 30 seconds, creatures you control gain +0/+3. This increases their health tremendously as well as their size, as long as you keep 3 or more spells in your hand, which shouldn't be hard to do if you have a creature-focused deck. This is going to help keep them alive, and usually when effects that boost health wear off, if the creature was at half health before, they'll usually be at full health, so this is also could be considered a heal over a long term. Spellstorm is a bit of a fun spell in a deck that's chock full of sorceries, because for 30 seconds what it's going to do is it's going to reduce the cost of your sorceries by 1 each time you cast a sorcery, without 3 seconds going by, up to a maximum of reduced cost by 3. So if you can keep spell drawing going quickly, then you can just keep spamming sorceries for 30 seconds without having to use a lot of mana, and this will just allow you to just keep cranking out sorceries. Should work really well in a blue deck that's just chock full of sorceries, or maybe like a blue-red deck, or maybe like a blue-black deck, etc. So that's it for all the blue cards and blue sorceries in Magic Legends. Make sure you check out our other videos on red, green, black, and white as well. We have them all in there. I'm sure more cards are going to be added over time. And make sure you check out the wiki if you have more questions or you want to look over the cards, etc., because we'll have them all on there.